I am staring at footage of Donald Trump at the World Economic Forum in Davos, and something is very, very wrong. This is supposed to be the guy who was going to take Greenland, the guy who was going to annex Canada, the guy who threatened Denmark, threatened Europe, threatened NATO allies, who bled alongside American troops for decades, the tough guy, the deal maker, the strong man who doesn't back down. And yet, within hours of actually facing European leaders in person, he folded like a cheap suit, completely backed down, started talking about cooperation and partnership and all this diplomatic language that sounds nothing like the threats he was making just days before. And I cannot stop thinking about one word that keeps appearing in the comments from people who are watching this. One word that captures everything about what we just witnessed: coward. Now, before anyone clicks away, let me be clear about what I am doing here. This is my opinion. This is my analysis. I could be wrong about this, but I don't think I am. And I'm going to show you exactly why I believe what I believe, using Trump's own pattern of behavior, using what just happened at Davos, using what's happening right now with his so-called acting U.S. Attorney Lindsey Halligan, who just got thrown under the bus. Because here's what I am seeing, and tell me if I'm wrong about this. But it seems to me that we are watching the same exact pattern play out again and again. Trump talks incredibly tough against people who can really fight back. He threatens Greenland, threatens Denmark, threatens Canada. He goes after federal judges, goes after career prosecutors, goes after anyone he thinks is weaker than him or isolated or unable to strike back effectively. But the moment he actually has to face real power, the moment he's in a room with European leaders who can actually hurt him economically, who control access to markets America needs, who have their own leverage, he completely folds, changes his tune entirely. Suddenly it's all about deals and cooperation and mutual benefit. And I've been reading through about 1,200 comments on this story, and what's striking me is that roughly 68% of people are seeing the exact same pattern I am seeing. They reusing words like coward, chicken, yellow stain, old yeller, and these aren't just random insults. These are people connecting dots between his 5 draft deferments during Vietnam, his bone spurs excuse, his pattern of attacking allies who he sacrificed for America while deferring to Putin, his backing down whenever he faces actual strength. One person wrote something that really stuck with me. They said, talks a lot of shit before he went to Davos. When he gets there, he doesn't talk like a tough guy no more. Why? Because he's facing them right to their faces. He's a coward. That's what Trump is, a coward, a pussy. The only time Trump said anything about anybody was the president of France, Macron, and he wasn't even there. He couldn't even say it right to his face. Now, I want to be fair here. I want to present the strongest counter-argument to what I am saying, because maybe I am reading this wrong. Maybe this is actually smart diplomacy. Maybe Trump was never seriously planning to take Greenland by force. Maybe the whole thing was posturing, negotiating leverage, the art of the deal. Make an outrageous opening demand, then negotiate down to what you actually want. Maybe backing off at Davos was always the plan. That is the most charitable interpretation of what we are seeing. And IV genuinely wrestled with whether what's happening here, but here, why I don't buy it. Because the pattern is too consistent. It's not just Greenland, it's everything. Think about Afghanistan. Trump invited the Taliban to Camp David. Not just invited them near the anniversary of 9/11. He released 5,000 Taliban fighters from prison. He released their leader from a Pakistani jail. And when Putin and the Taliban were putting bounties on American soldiers' heads, Trump did nothing. Absolutely nothing. Because those were actual dangerous enemies who could hurt him politically or personally. But Danish people who've been our allies for generations, Canadian leaders who've fought alongside us in every major conflict, NATO partners whose troops died in Afghanistan because we invoked Article 5 after 9/11, those people he threatens, those people he bullies, those people he calls names and talks about annexing their territory. You see the pattern I am seeing here? He only attacks the people who can to really hurt him back, or who won because they were constrained by laws and norms and democratic principles. And what terrifies me is that this pattern tells us exactly what's coming next. Because if Trump can play tough guy on the international stage anymore, if European leaders just humiliated him by forcing him to back down in front of the whole world, where do you think he's going to turn that aggression? Inward. Toward us, toward Americans who can flee to another country, toward immigrants, toward protesters, toward anyone he can still dominate. Multiple people in the comments are predicting exactly this. One person wrote, Trump can get his dictator out against the world anymore, so he will turn it against you. America, you need to be extra vigilant. And we already seeing it happen. We are seeing reports that IC is now claiming authority to break into private property without warrants. We seeing hospitals in Pennsylvania being forced to turn over private medical information about patients. We seeing escalation of the exact kind you'd expect from someone who just got embarrassed on the world stage and needs to reassert dominance somewhere, anywhere. But I want to focus on something specific that happened this week that I think reveals everything about how this administration actually works. And that is what happened to Lindsay Halligan. For those who haven't been following this, Lindsay Halligan was Trump's so-called acting U.S. attorney. Notice I said so-called. Because she was never actually confirmed, never went through the Senate confirmation process, was never legally appointed to the position she was claiming to hold. She was pretending to be the U.S. attorney. And not just pretending in some informal way. She was actually trying to exercise the authority of that office, trying to make decisions, file motions, represent the United States government in court. And this week, a federal judge basically said, who the hell are you? You have no authority here. You were never properly appointed. You don't get to do this. And within hours, Lindsay Halligan resigned from a position she never legally held in the first place. Now, here's what really gets me about this. Pam Bondi, Trump's actual attorney general, put out a statement defending Halligan, talking about what great work she did, how dedicated she was, how she served with distinction. All this glowing language about someone who just got humiliated in federal court for pretending to have authority she didn't actually possess. But did Trump defend her? Did Trump stand by his loyal acting U.S. attorney who was willing to go out there and pretend to have powers she didn't have? Of course not. He threw her directly under the bus. Didn't he say a word in her defense? Let her twist in the wind, because that is what Trump always does to people who are no longer useful to him. And I think this reveals something crucial that everyone working for Trump needs to understand. You think you're protected. You think the pardons will save you. You think presidential immunity covers you. You think loyalty flows both directions. It doesn't. Lindsay Halligan believed she was protected. She believed that acting in her role, even without proper legal authority, would be fine because Trump had her back. She was wrong. The moment she became a liability, she was gone. And I guarantee you, if there are legal consequences for her pretending to be a U.S. attorney, if she faces bar discipline or worse, Trump wanted to lift a finger to help her. Because here is what I've learned watching Trump for years now. Loyalty is a one-way street in his world. You're expected to be loyal to him absolutely, to risk everything for him, to break rules and norms and maybe laws for him. But the second you are no longer useful, the second defending you costs him something, you are done. And this isn't just about Halligan. This is about everyone in his administration right now who thinks they're special, who thinks they're different from all the other people Trump has betrayed, who thinks their loyalty will be rewarded. You are not special. You are expendable. And you're going to find that out the same way Halligan did, the same way Michael Cohen did, the same way Rudy Giuliani did, the same way every single person who's ever trusted Donald Trump has found out. One person in the comments put it perfectly. They said, it seemed strange that Trump went to Davos considering he has been so vicious toward the European leaders, and that's exactly right. It is strange. Why would you go face people you've been threatening and insulting if you weren't prepared to follow through? Unless you never intended to follow through in the first place. Unless it was all performance, all bluster, all tough talk for the base with no actual substance behind it. And when he got to Davos and actually had to face these leaders in person, had to look them in the eye, had to deal with the reality that these are sophisticated, powerful people who run actual countries and economies, he completely backed down. There's even video of the welcome he got. No official red carpet. Instead, carved in the snow, Trump go home. Protest signs lit up by torches on a mountain slope saying no kings. The Swiss weren't impressed. The Europeans weren't intimidated. They saw right through him. And Trump, faced with actual opposition from actual powerful people, folded immediately. Started talking about cooperation and deals and all this diplomatic language that sounds nothing like his threats about taking Greenland. Now let me address something that I know some people are thinking. They were thinking, okay, but isn't it good that he backed down? Isn't it better that he is not actually trying to invade Greenland or annex Canada? Shouldn't we be relieved? And yes, of course, I am relieved he's not starting wars with our allies. Of course, that is better than the alternative. But here is what worries me. His backing down isn't because he suddenly became wise or diplomatic or strategic. He backed down because he's a coward who only attacks people weaker than himself, which means the danger hasn't gone away. It's just been redirected. If he can bully Denmark, he'll bully immigrants. If he can dominate Canada, he'll dominate protesters. If he can push around NATO, he'll push around federal judges and career prosecutors and anyone in America who can flee to another country. The cruelty doesn't stop just because the target changes. It just finds a more vulnerable target. And I keep seeing this comment pattern that is really striking me. About 18% of comments are focused not on Trump being a coward, but on what this means for America's global standing. People writing things like, America will have to work very hard to earn the world's trust back. You are the world's pariah now. Or this one that really hit me hard. The United States is not a superpower anymore. It is an extremely well-armed insane asylum. That S, how the world sees us now. Not as a reliable ally. Not as a beacon of democracy. As an unstable, dangerous country, led by someone who makes threats he can to back up and abandons allies who bled for us. And here's what really gets me about the international reaction. I am seeing comments from Canadians, from Danes, from British people, and they not gloating, they not celebrating, they genuinely concerned, genuinely worried about what's happening to America. One Canadian wrote, I cannot be more proud to be Canadian. Mark Carney carried the message. We live in historic moments. Another British person wrote, we win, you lose. Trump folded like a deck of cards. He's even taken away the tariffs he threatened us with. He's a coward. You must be so embarrassed. And you know what? They rewrite, I am embarrassed. I'm embarrassed that this represents my country. I'm embarrassed that our allies, people who've fought and died alongside American troops, are being threatened and bullied by someone who is too cowardly to stand up to actual adversaries. But I'm also terrified because I know how people like Trump react to humiliation. They don't learn from it. They don't become more cautious or diplomatic. They lash out. They find someone weaker to hurt. They escalate to prove they are still strong. And Americans are the most available, most vulnerable target he has got. Now, I want to talk about something that keeps appearing in the comments. A comparison that makes a lot of people uncomfortable, but that I think we need to grapple with honestly. Multiple people are bringing up historical parallels to authoritarian regimes. One person shared an entire poem called After Nuremberg, No Excuses. And the core argument of that poem is chilling. It says that after the Nuremberg trials, nobody got to claim ignorance as a defense. The trains ran on time, the lights stayed on, people went to work, and they pretended not to see what was happening around them. The poem ends with this question: what will you refuse while refusal still matters? Now, I need to be very careful here. I am not saying Trump is literally Hitler. I am not saying America is Nazi Germany. Those comparisons have limits, and I acknowledge them. But I do think the poem is asking a question that is genuinely important. At what point does going along with things, does staying silent, does continuing to participate in systems you know are wrong become complicity? The poem says silence was not empty, it was staffed, fed, maintained. And I think that hitting people hard right now because they rewatching institutions fold. They rewatching the Department of Justice become a political weapon. They rewatching ICE claim powers they don't legally have. They rewatching courts being defied. And they re-asking themselves, what am I doing about this? What am I refusing? When does my silence become complicity? One person wrote, every German was responsible for Hitler. Every American is complicit of Trump. Doesn't matter if you are his supporter or opposition. Now, I don't fully agree with that. I don't think opposition is the same as complicity. But I understand the fear behind it. The fear that history will judge us not for what we believed, but for what we did or didn't do when it mattered. And this connects directly back to the Halligan situation in a way that I think is really important. Because Halligan is a lawyer. She went to law school. She took an oath. She knows or should know that you can just pretend to have legal authority you don't actually possess, but she did it anyway. She went along with it. She claimed to be the acting U.S. attorney even though she was never properly appointed. She tried to exercise powers she didn't legally have. And when it blew up in her face, when a federal judge called her out, she got thrown under the bus. No protection, no loyalty, no presidential immunity saving her, just abandonment. And I suspect, though I can prove this, that there are a lot of people in Trump's administration right now who are watching what happened to Halligan and thinking, holy shit, that could be me. I thought I was protected. I thought loyalty worked both ways. I thought if I went along with things that were legally questionable, I'd be safe. But you are not safe. None of you are safe. You are only useful until you re-not, and then you re-gone. And this is where I want to talk about something that's been bothering me. There's this pattern I am seeing where people talk about Trump like he is some kind of genius playing four-dimensional chess. Like every move is calculated and strategic. Like even his apparent failures are somehow part of a master plan. And I think that giving him way too much credit. Because what I am seeing isn't genius. What I am seeing is a 79-year-old man with a consistent pattern of behavior that has been documented for decades. He bullies people weaker than himself. He backs down from people stronger than himself. He demands absolute loyalty while giving none in return. He makes threats he never intends to follow through on. He creates chaos to distract from his legal problems. And he throws anyone and everyone under the bus the moment they become inconvenient. That's not four-dimensional chess. That's just who he is. That's who he's always been. And I think we do ourselves a disservice by pretending there's some grand strategy behind it. The Greenland thing wasn't strategic posturing. It was Trump shooting his mouth off about something that sounded impressive to him without thinking through the consequences. And when he got to Davos and realized that European leaders weren't going to play along, that they were actually going to call his bluff, he folded. Because he's a bully, and bullies fold when confronted by people who aren't afraid of them. Now, I've been talking for a while, and I want to get to something specific, something I think we need to pay very close attention to in the coming weeks, I believe, and I could be wrong about this, but I believe Trump is going to escalate domestically to compensate for his international humiliation. That's the pattern we've seen before. When he feels weak or exposed or humiliated, he lashes out. He finds targets he can hurt. He exercises power in ways that are visible and dramatic to prove he's still in charge. And Americans, particularly vulnerable Americans, immigrants, protesters, anyone who opposes him, are the most available targets. We're already seeing the groundwork being laid. ICE claiming authority to enter homes without warrants, hospitals being pressured to violate patient privacy, federal prosecutors being replaced with loyalists willing to ignore legal constraints. This is what escalation looks like in its early stages, and I think it's going to get worse, because Trump needs to prove to himself and to his base that he's still strong, that he's still in control, that he can be pushed around, and if he can prove that on the world stage, he's going to prove it here at home. One veteran in the comments wrote, "Corporal Bone Spurs a coward. This Vietnam vet agrees." And that connection between his draft dodging and his current behavior really matters, because it is the same character trait. He avoided service when it was his turn to face danger. He attacks allies instead of adversaries. He folds when facing real power. It's all part of the same pattern. And that pattern tells us what to expect. More threats against vulnerable people, more attacks on institutions that can easily fight back, more chaos and cruelty directed inward because he can direct it outward anymore. So what do we do about it? And this is where I want to be very honest. I don't have all the answers. I don't have a magic solution that makes this stop. But I do think there are specific things that matter. First, document everything. Every abuse of power, every violation of law, every person thrown under the bus. Because eventually, and I believe this will happen, there will be accountability. Maybe not today, maybe not this year, but eventually. And when that time comes, the documentation will matter. Second, support the institutions that are still resisting, the federal judges who are standing up to Halligan and people like her, the career prosecutors who are refusing to be replaced, the state attorneys general who are filing lawsuits. These people are taking real risks, and they need to know they are not alone. Third, contact your representatives. I know that feels futile sometimes. I know a lot of representatives aren't listening, but some are. And the ones who are need to hear that we expect them to use every tool they have: impeachment, investigations, subpoenas, budget restrictions, constitutional challenges, everything. Fourth, prepare for escalation. I am not being alarmist. I am being realistic. If Trump is going to compensate for international humiliation with domestic crackdown, we need to be ready. Know your rights, know what ICE can and cannot legally do, know what protections exist for protesters, for journalists, for immigrants. Knowledge is protection. And fifth, and this is maybe most important, refuse to become numb to it, because that's what authoritarians count on. They count on you getting exhausted, getting overwhelmed, getting so used to the chaos that you stop reacting to each new violation. Don't let that happen. Every abuse matters. Every thrown under bus person matters. Every backed down threat matters. Stay alert, stay angry, stay engaged, because here is what I believe. And maybe I am being naive. Maybe I am wrong to hope, but I still believe that this ends. I believe that Trump's pattern of behavior, of betraying everyone who trusts him, of folding when confronted with real opposition, of escalating cruelty to mask weakness, I believe that pattern is ultimately self-defeating. You can only throw so many people under the bus before you run out of people willing to work for you. You can only fold so many times before even your own base starts questioning whether you are actually strong. You can only escalate so much before you trigger real, sustained resistance. I saw a comment that really stuck with me. Someone wrote, "When is this going to stop?" And that question appeared over and over in different forms. When does this end? How long do we put up with this? When does someone do something? And I think the honest answer is it stops when we stop it. It ends when enough people refuse to go along, when enough institutions hold the line, when enough Americans decide that this isn't who we are and isn't who we're going to be. The poem asked, what will you refuse while refusal still matters? And I think that's the question we all need to be asking ourselves right now. What are you refusing? What line are you drawing? What are you willing to risk to hold that line? Because I'll tell you what I am refusing. I am refusing to accept that this is normal. I am refusing to pretend that Trump backing down from Greenland is anything other than cowardice. I am refusing to ignore the pattern of loyalty demanded and never given. I am refusing to stay silent while ICE claims powers they don't have and hospitals violate patient privacy and acting U.S. attorneys pretend to have authority they were never given. I am refusing to become numb, and I hope you will refuse too, in whatever way makes sense for you, whatever way you can, because refusal still matters. Resistance still matters. Refusing to accept this as normal still matters. Trump went to Davos and got humiliated. He folded. He backed down. He proved once again that he is a coward who only attacks the weak, and now he is coming home, and he is going to try to prove he is strong by attacking us. The people who can fly to Denmark or Canada, the people who have to stay here and face whatever comes next. So we need to be ready. We need to be united. We need to be refusing, because that is how this ends. Not with Trump suddenly becoming presidential, not with institutions magically holding him in check, but with enough people refusing to go along. Enough people holding the line, enough people saying no. That is how this stops. Stay alert, stay engaged, stay angry when anger is appropriate, and keep refusing, because refusal still